There is an ambition that looks, from the outside, like the best possible version of a person. It wakes up early. It works late. It sets the bar higher every time the bar is cleared. Because clearing the bar was never really the point. It produces extraordinary things. Careers built from nothing. Children raised with intention. Bodies sculpted by discipline. Homes designed with care. And it is never, not once, satisfied. Not because it is greedy. Not because it is ungrateful. But because satisfaction was never what it was actually looking for. It was looking for proof. Proof that it is enough. Proof that it deserves to be here. Proof that the quiet, persistent voice underneath all the achieving, the one that says not yet, not enough, not quite, is finally, definitively wrong. And the tragedy is this. Every achievement it produces becomes new evidence for that voice, instead of against it. Because if you needed to achieve to be worthy, then worthiness was never unconditional. And unconditional is the only kind that heals anything. This is the paradox of perfectionism. Diane was 48 years old and had, by every measurable standard, built a remarkable life. Partner at a law firm in Chicago, mother of 2 high-achieving children, a home that looked like it had been curated by someone who understood both aesthetics and the precise impression they made on guests. A body maintained with the discipline of someone for whom discipline had become indistinguishable from identity. People looked at Diane's life the way people look at a beautifully set table, with a mixture of admiration and mild inadequacy. What they could not see, because Diane had spent decades making sure of it, was what the table cost. The Sunday evenings that arrived with a dread she could not explain and could not shake. The performance review she had aced had left her, within 48 hours, already anxious about the next one. The moments of genuine accomplishment, the partnership the cases won, the children's milestones, that produced, instead of satisfaction, a brief and disorienting blankness followed immediately by the quiet question, what's next? Not as excitement, as compulsion. She had been running towards something her entire adult life. She was beginning to suspect, in the small hours of sleepless nights, that she had no idea what it was. Diane's childhood had been a particular kind of education. Her mother was a woman of high standards and limited warmth, not cruel, not neglectful, but precise in the way she distributed approval. It came for results, for grades, for behavior, for the impression Diane made on adults who mattered. It came reliably, consistently, in direct proportion to performance. And young Diane had been an excellent student of this system. She had learned that love was a response to excellence, that approval was something you earned through output, that the way to secure your place in a relationship, in a family, in the world, was to make yourself indispensable through achievement. She had taken that curriculum and built an entire life around it. A life that worked by every external measure. A life that had her sitting in her car in the parking garage of her own law firm at 7 in the morning, unable to make herself go inside, because the thought of one more day of performing competence she no longer felt had become, overnight, unbearable. She sat in that car for 40 minutes, and for the first time in 26 years of professional life, Diane did not know what she was doing any of it for. 3 time zones away, in Portland, Oregon, a 29-year-old named Miles was failing for the first time in his life. Or rather, he was succeeding at a level most people would have found extraordinary and experiencing it as failure. Miles was a designer, gifted in the specific way that made other designers slightly uncomfortable, the kind of talent that seemed unfair in its abundance. He had built a reputation early, won awards that mattered, attracted clients whose names carried weight. And he had not finished a personal project in 3 years. Not for lack of starting. He started constantly. Filled notebooks with concepts, opened files that accumulated layers of abandoned iterations, began things in the white heat of inspiration, and abandoned them the moment they fell short of the version that existed. perfect and unreachable. In his imagination, his professional work he could finish. There were clients, deadlines, external structures that overrode his internal critic long enough to produce deliverables. But his own work, the work that actually mattered to him, the work that was supposed to say something true about who he was, remained perpetually agonizingly unfinished. Because finishing meant showing, and showing meant being measured, and being measured meant the possibility of being found, finally, officially, by people whose opinions he respected. Not as good as he needed to be. As long as it was unfinished, it was still potentially perfect. The moment it was done, it was just a thing that existed in the world. A thing that could disappoint. Miles had unconsciously chosen the paralysis of perfectionism over the vulnerability of completion. And he was calling it high standards. Here is where the paradox lives. Perfectionism presents itself as the pursuit of excellence. And in its early form, in the right doses, it can produce excellent things. The attention to detail, the refusal to settle, the drive to do the work better than it needs to be done. But perfectionism that is rooted not in love of the work but in fear of inadequacy is a different animal entirely. It is a treadmill built to feel like a road. Every achievement completed, every standard met, every bar cleared, and the treadmill keeps moving. The destination never arrives because the destination was never a place. It was a feeling. The feeling of being enough, of being safe, of finally, permanently securing the approval that was conditionally distributed in a childhood bedroom somewhere 30 years ago. And that feeling cannot be produced by achievement. Not because you haven't achieved enough, but because achievement was never the right instrument for that particular hunger. You cannot think your way to worthiness. You cannot produce your way there. You cannot organize, optimize, perfect, or accomplish your way into the unconditional sense of enoughness that perfectionism is actually searching for. The search itself is the proof that you don't believe you have it. And the more you search, the more you confirm the belief you were trying to disprove. Diane's turning point came from the most ordinary of directions. Her daughter Simone, 22, recently graduated, standing at the beginning of her own life with the specific anxiety of someone who has watched a high-performing parent and absorbed, without being told, the terms and conditions of love in this family. Sat across from her mother one evening and said something that stopped the room. She said, "Mom, I don't know how to just be. I only know how to do. And I think I learned that from watching you. And I'm scared." Diane heard the words. And underneath them, she heard something else. She heard herself, 22 years old, standing at the beginning of her own life with that same unnamed fear already installed and running. She had not passed on her achievements to Simone. She had passed on the architecture of her insufficiency, the mechanism by which a person learns that their value is conditional, that rest is laziness, that enough is something that always lives just past the next thing. She had replicated, with love and intention and complete unconsciousness, exactly what her own mother had given her. Diane reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. She said, "I don't know how to just be either, but I think we need to learn. Together." Before we pass it on any further, Simone looked at her mother, really looked the way children look when they are seeing the person underneath the performance for the first time, and something between them shifted. Something that had been formal and careful and conducted at the careful distance of mutual high performance became, in that moment, simply human. Two people sitting with the same wound, finally willing to name it. Miles finished something. Not the perfect thing, not the project that was going to say everything he needed to say in exactly the way he needed to say it. A smaller thing, a piece he had started 6 months earlier and abandoned twice, and returned to and decided on a Thursday evening with no ceremony whatsoever to simply complete. He posted it online at 11 at night, without announcement, without a carefully constructed caption, without the strategic timing he usually applied to his professional releases, and went to sleep. He woke to responses that did something the awards and the client praise had never quite done. They said, "This feels true. This feels like something real. I don't know why, but this one got me." Not the polished work, not the optimized work, the finished work. The imperfect, completed, released into the world work that had been allowed to simply be what it was. Miles sat with those responses for a long time. He thought about all the projects still living in folders on his desktop. All the versions of himself he had refused to show the world because they didn't match the internal image of who he needed to be before he was allowed to be seen. He thought about how much of his life he had spent protecting a perfect version of himself that didn't exist from a judgment that it turned out was never coming. The world did not want his perfect work. The world wanted his true work. And true work, by definition, required showing up as something other than perfect. It required showing up as himself. The paradox of perfectionism does not resolve by lowering your standards. It resolves by examining what your standards are actually in service of. If they are in service of the work, of genuine craft, genuine care, genuine love of what you are making and who you are making it for, then they are a gift. Honor them. But if they are in service of a proof you are trying to produce, if they are the mechanism by which you are trying to finally permanently earn the right to exist without apology, then no standard will ever be high enough. No achievement will ever land where you need it to land, because the place you need it to land is not in the external world. It is in the quiet, persistent, foundational belief that you were enough before the achieving started. That you were enough at the beginning. That the child who needed no resume, no performance, no perfectly curated life to deserve love, that child did not stop being worthy when they grew up, they just forgot. And perfectionism, for all its noise and drive and spectacular productivity, is simply the long way around to remembering. This has been the paradox of perfectionism. Whatever you are working so hard to prove, whatever voice you have been trying to silence with achievement, it cannot hear accomplishments. It can only hear one thing, and that thing has been true about you since before you knew you needed to prove it.